The 3-year-old Maid's toddler packed her school bag to follow the billionaire. The reason will break you. The backpack was pink. It had a cartoon bunny on the front with big glassy eyes and a smile that never changed, no matter what happened around it. It was the kind of backpack you'd find in the dollar section of a discount store, the kind that cost almost nothing and meant absolutely everything. Maya found it on a Tuesday morning. She wasn't supposed to be in her daughter's room. She was supposed to be downstairs making breakfast, setting the table, getting ready for another long day of work. But she had heard something, a shuffling sound, a dragging sound, and when she pushed open the door to little Lily's room, she stopped breathing for a moment. Her daughter was 3 years old. 3. She had chubby fingers that still had those little rolls at the knuckle, the kind that made your heart squeeze every time you looked at them. She had dark curly hair that went every direction in the morning, and big brown eyes that looked at the world like everything in it was a miracle worth studying. Right now, those big brown eyes were completely focused on her task. Lily was packing her backpack. She had laid everything out on the floor first, the way she had seen her mama do before a trip. There was her stuffed elephant, Gerald. There was the little blanket with the yellow ducks on it that she had slept with since she was 6 months old. There was a granola bar she had apparently snuck from the kitchen cabinet. There was a drawing she had made, just scribbles really, but she had pointed at it once and said, "Our house." So Maya had hung it on the refrigerator.
She was taking it down now.
Putting it in the bag. "Baby," Maya said softly. "What are you doing?" Lily looked up. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look scared. She looked like someone who had made a very important decision and was simply following through on it. "I'm going," Lily said. Maya crossed the room and knelt down on the floor. She was wearing her work uniform, a simple black dress, sensible shoes, her hair pulled back. She was 26 years old, and she felt about 100 years old most mornings, but right now, kneeling on this floor covered in cartoon animals and wooden blocks, she felt something else. Something she couldn't name yet. "Going where?" Maya asked. Lily pointed. Not toward the window. Not toward the front door. She pointed up. Toward the ceiling. Toward the floor above them. Toward the penthouse. Maya closed her eyes for 1 second. Just 1 second. She worked as a housekeeper in one of the most expensive residential buildings in New York City. It was a job she had found 2 years ago, desperate and alone with a baby on her hip and $43 in her checking account. The building offered subsidized housing for essential staff in the lower floors, a small apartment, barely 700 square feet, but it was safe and it was warm and the lock on the door worked, and after the places Maya had lived before, that meant everything. She cleaned the common areas. She cleaned the lobby. And 3 days a week, she cleaned the penthouse. The penthouse belonged to a man named James Calloway. He was 38 years old. He was worth somewhere between $3 and $4 billion, depending on which magazine you read. He had a jaw that looked like it had been carved out of something, and eyes the color of a winter sky. That particular shade of gray-blue that made people feel cold and warm at the same time. He was also, in Maya's personal and private opinion, the loneliest human being she had ever encountered. She had been cleaning his home for almost 2 years. In those 2 years, he had eaten maybe 4 meals at that long dining room table that seated 20 people. He had slept in a bed that was made for 2, and always looked like only one side had been touched. He had books everywhere, thousands of them, and she could tell by the bent spines and the underlined passages that he actually read them, which broke her heart a little for reasons she couldn't explain. He was not unkind. He was not rude. He was just absent. Even when he was standing right in front of you, there was a part of him somewhere far away, living in a country that didn't exist on any map. Lily had met him exactly once. It was 6 weeks ago. Maya had made a mistake she never usually made. She had brought Lily to work. Her babysitter had canceled, her backup babysitter was sick, and she had a shift she simply could not miss because she needed the money and needed the job, and there was no option B. She had brought Lily in her stroller, parked her in the corner of the penthouse living room with a juice box and a handful of goldfish crackers, and prayed that Mr. Calloway would be at his office for the whole morning like he usually was.
He was not at his office.
He came home early. Maya had heard the elevator open and felt her stomach drop straight through the floor. She had rushed out of the kitchen with her cleaning gloves still on, fully prepared to apologize and offer to work extra hours and do whatever she needed to do to not lose this job. But Mr. Calloway had stopped walking the moment he came through the door. Because Lily had looked up at him from the floor, this enormous man in his expensive suit in his enormous empty apartment, and she had held up a goldfish cracker and said, with complete confidence, "Want one?" Something had happened to his face. Not a smile. Not exactly. It was something more complicated than a smile. It was the look of a person who has been very cold for a very long time and has suddenly, unexpectedly, felt something warm. He had sat down on the floor, right there, in his suit, on the floor, and he had taken the goldfish cracker. "Thank you," he had said, very quietly, like he hadn't used his voice in a while. Lily had nodded like this was perfectly natural. "You're welcome," she said. Then she went back to her juice box. He had stayed on that floor for 45 minutes. He and Lily had built a tower out of some blocks she had in her bag. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Lily did most of the talking, which mostly consisted of telling Gerald the elephant what to do and narrating her own block stacking process in great detail. When Maya finally said it was time to go, Lily had stood up, walked over to Mr. Calloway, and hugged his knee, because that was as high as she could reach. He had looked down at that tiny child holding his knee like it was the most natural thing in the world, and something in his face had shifted, like a painting that had been slightly crooked for years, and someone had just, gently, straightened it. Maya had not let herself think about that moment too much. But Lily, apparently, had thought about it every single day since. Now she sat on her bedroom floor, backpack packed, ready to go upstairs, because in her 3-year-old heart, she had made up her mind about something. "Why are you going to Mr. Calloway's, baby?" Maya asked, keeping her voice steady, keeping her face calm, even though her chest was doing something complicated. Lily looked at her mama with those big, serious eyes.
"Because he's sad," she said.
"And he doesn't have anybody." She picked up her backpack. She put it on her small shoulders. She looked at her mother expectantly, waiting for her to open the door. Maya sat on the floor for a long moment, and then, without fully understanding why, she felt tears prick the back of her eyes. Because her 3-year-old daughter had seen something that Maya had spent 2 years carefully not letting herself see. The man upstairs was not just wealthy and distant and complicated. He was alone. And somehow, this tiny child with her pink bunny backpack and her stuffed elephant and her stolen granola bar had decided that was simply not acceptable. James Calloway had learned very early in life that feelings were a kind of weakness. Not because anyone had ever told him that directly. Nobody sat him down and said those words. It was subtler than that. The way his father would clear his throat and change the subject when conversation got too personal. The way his mother, beautiful and brittle, would smile with her mouth but keep her eyes carefully empty. The way the adults in his world treated emotion the way you treat a stain on a white carpet, something to be dealt with quickly and quietly before anyone else noticed. He had been a sensitive child. He knew that now, looking back. He had been the kind of kid who cried at commercials and kept a journal and felt every disappointment like a small death. He had been the kind of kid who needed things, warmth, connection, the specific comfort of being known by someone. His world had not had much patience for that kind of kid. So he had rebuilt himself. Carefully. Methodically. The way you'd renovate an old house, gutting the parts that didn't serve you, reinforcing the walls, making everything cleaner and harder and more efficient. By the time he was in college, he was focused in a way that made his professors uncomfortable. By the time he was 25, he had made his first 100 million. By the time he was 30, he had more money than he could ever spend, and a life so perfectly constructed that nothing could get in. Nothing could get in. That was the point. His marriage had lasted 3 years. Her name was Claire, and she was stunning and sharp, and she had loved him. He believed that, but she had also eventually said the thing that he was never able to argue with. I feel like I'm living with someone who checked out a long time ago. I'm so tired of talking to a wall. He had not fought for her. He had signed the papers and watched her go and told himself it was for the best and poured himself into work and bought this penthouse and filled it with beautiful things and told himself that was enough. He told himself that every day. Some days he almost believed it. He was thinking about this, or rather, he was doing what he usually did, which was working very hard to think about absolutely nothing, when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter.
It was his assistant, David.
Your 9 a.m. called to reschedule. You have a clear morning. A clear morning. James looked around his penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed him all of New York City, gray and glittering and indifferent. The housekeeper had been in yesterday. He could tell because everything was exactly right, because this was what she did, this quiet woman who moved through his space like water, fixing things, making things right, never disturbing anything. He had noticed her. He was honest enough to admit that to himself, at least. Maya. He had looked at her employee file once, which was perhaps a strange thing to do, but he had told himself it was just due diligence. She was 26. She had a daughter. She had worked in the building for 2 years. Her record was spotless. Every supervisor note said the same thing: reliable, hardworking, exceptional attention to detail. None of that explained why he noticed when she was there and noticed when she wasn't. He pushed the thought away. He was making coffee when he heard the elevator. His penthouse took up the entire top floor. The elevator opened directly into a small foyer, and he had a clear line of sight to it from the kitchen. He wasn't expecting anyone. David knew he hated unannounced visitors. The building had a strict policy about. The elevator doors opened. He saw the pink backpack first, then the curly hair, then the big brown eyes, which found him immediately, the way the eyes of very small children always find you, directly, without self-consciousness, without the careful social calculations that adults make before making eye contact. Lily walked into his penthouse like she owned it. Behind her, one step back, was Maya. Maya looked like a person preparing to face a firing squad with dignity. Her chin was up, her shoulders were back, and her eyes said about 15 different things simultaneously: apologetic, protective, defensive, and underneath all of it, something exhausted and real. I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I know this is completely inappropriate. She packed a bag this morning and she wanted to come up here, and I tried to explain, but she's 3 and she stopped.
Took a breath. I'm so sorry.
I'll take her back downstairs right now. James was not looking at Maya. He was looking at Lily. Lily had crossed the room. She had walked up to him where he stood by the kitchen counter with his half-made coffee, and she had put both hands on the counter and looked up at him and said, in her very serious 3-year-old voice, I brought Gerald. She held up the elephant. James Calloway had run companies. He had sat across negotiation tables from men twice his size and stared them down without blinking. He had survived things he never talked about: the collapse of his first business, his father's death, the end of his marriage, the years in between. None of that had prepared him for this.
You did, he said. He wanted to see you, Lily said.
I told him about you. James set down his coffee mug very carefully. He was aware of Maya standing near the elevator, ready to retreat, giving him every possible exit from this moment. He did not take the exit. What did you tell him? He asked. Lily thought about this seriously. I told him you sit on the floor, she said. And you eat fishies. And you're sad. The kitchen was very quiet. I'm not, he started. Lily shook her head. It was such a definitive shake. Such a certain, unapologetic correction. You are, she said, without cruelty, without accusation. Just the plain truth, delivered the way only small children can deliver plain truths, without agenda, without judgment, without any awareness that it might be the most devastating thing anyone has said to you in years. You are sad. James looked at this child. Then he looked up at her mother, who was standing by the elevator with her hand pressed flat against her sternum and her eyes very bright. He looked back at Lily. "I made too much coffee," he said, finally. "Do you want orange juice?" Lily nodded. She climbed up onto one of the kitchen stools like she had done it 1,000 times. She set Gerald on the counter. She looked around the kitchen with those wide brown eyes. "It's big," she announced. "It is," he agreed. "Do you get lonely?" The question hit him somewhere behind the ribs. He was quiet for a moment. He got out the orange juice. He poured a small glass. He set it in front of her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Sometimes." Lily wrapped both hands around the glass. She looked at him with the complete, uncomplicated compassion of someone who has not yet learned that compassion costs you something. "That's why I came," she said simply. "So, you don't have to be." Behind them both, near the elevator, Maya made a sound that was almost not a sound at all. A soft catch of breath, like something in her chest had shifted. James did not turn around, but he felt it. The morning stretched in a way that mornings rarely did in that penthouse. Usually, time in this apartment moved the way time moves in empty spaces, fast and meaningless, 1 hour sliding into the next without texture or warmth or anything to anchor it. James had read once that the brain doesn't form strong memories without emotional content. That made a certain brutal sense to him. He had weeks, sometimes months, that he could barely remember because nothing had happened in them that mattered. This morning was different. Maya had tried to leave twice. Both times, Lily had simply said, "Mama, stay," with that particular toddler authority that was impossible to argue with, and Maya had stayed, but she kept herself on the edges. She sat at the far end of the kitchen counter with her hands folded, watching her daughter with that look parents get when their child does something that simultaneously fills them with pride and terror. James noticed that Maya never fully relaxed. There was always something held in reserve, some part of her that was calculating exits, measuring distances, staying ready. He recognized it because he did the same thing. He had done it his whole life. But on her it looked different. On her it looked like something that had been forced on her rather than chosen.
He wanted to ask about that. He didn't.
Instead, he made pancakes. He could not fully explain why. He had not made pancakes in years, possibly 4 years, possibly more. He had a chef who came 3 times a week and left meals in labeled containers, and he ate them alone at the kitchen counter because the dining room felt absurd for one person. But this morning, with Lily sitting on the stool watching him with huge attentive eyes, he had opened the cabinet and found the box of pancake mix that had somehow survived multiple rounds of the chef restocking the pantry, and he had thought, why not? "You're making circles," Lily observed, watching the batter hit the pan. "That's how pancakes work," James said. "Why?" "That's a good question." He thought about it. "I don't actually know." Lily accepted this with the philosophical equanimity of someone who has learned that adults don't always have answers, and that this is simply a fact of life. "I like triangles," she said. "Triangles? Yes, please." James looked at his pan. He looked at the batter. He attempted, with moderate success, to make a triangular pancake. It came out more like a lopsided rhombus. Lily studied it seriously when he put it on her plate. "That's a good try," she said kindly. From the end of the counter, Maya made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. James glanced at her. For just a moment, just a fraction of a second, she looked like a completely different person. The careful distance dropped and she looked young and warm and real, and then she caught him looking and the careful distance came back up and she looked away. He turned back to the stove. They ate pancakes. Lily narrated the entire experience, including a detailed update on what Gerald the elephant thought of the penthouse. He says it needs more toys. A rundown of her theories about why the sky was blue today and gray yesterday. It changes its mind. And an unprompted performance of a song she had apparently learned at her daycare program, which had about 4 words and approximately 37 verses. James ate his pancakes and listened. He could not remember the last time he had sat in his own kitchen and listened to someone talk. He realized, somewhere around verse 20 of Lily's song, that something in his chest felt different. Looser. Like a fist that had been clenched for years was, very slowly, beginning to open. He was afraid of it. He recognized the fear. He had learned to be afraid of open spaces, of dropped guards, of the specific vulnerability that comes from wanting something. Wanting was dangerous. Wanting meant you could lose. He had structured his entire life around not wanting things he couldn't control, not people, not warmth, not the feeling of sitting in a kitchen on a Tuesday morning with pancakes and orange juice and the sound of a small voice filling up the silence. "You have a sad picture," Lily said. He looked up. She was pointing at the wall across from the kitchen, a large black and white photograph, beautifully framed, of an empty road stretching into fog. He had bought it from a gallery years ago because a very sophisticated woman had told him it was extraordinary, and he had agreed with his mouth, even though something about it had always made him feel vaguely terrible. "You think so?" he said. "There's nobody on the road," Lily said. "It needs people." He looked at the photograph. He had looked at it 1,000 times. He had never thought about the absence of people. He had thought about the composition, the lighting, the technical achievement of it. He had never thought, "There's nobody on the road." "You might be right," he said. Lily slid off the stool. She walked over to the photograph and stood in front of it with her arms crossed and her head tilted, the way she did when she was evaluating something. "I can make you a better one," she said. "With people in it." "I'd like that. I'll need crayons." He found crayons. He didn't know he had crayons. They were in a junk drawer along with dried-out pens and take-out menus and the accumulated debris of a life not quite lived, but there they were. He brought them to her along with a piece of printer paper, and she sat down on his kitchen floor and began to draw. James stood at the counter and looked at Maya. Maya was looking at her daughter on the floor with an expression so tender it was almost painful to look at. "She's extraordinary," James said quietly. Maya looked up.
"She is," she said.
And then, after a pause, with a kind of raw honesty that she clearly hadn't planned to offer, "She's the only thing I've ever done that I know for certain was right." The words sat between them. "She sees people," James said. "Really sees them. Most adults have forgotten how to do that." Maya was quiet for a moment. "She saw you the first time she met you. She talked about you for days after that. Every night at bedtime she would say, 'Mama, is the sad man okay?'" Her voice caught slightly. I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't know how to explain that some people choose to be. She stopped. "Alone," he finished for her. She met his eyes. "I was going to say closed off," she said gently. "But yes." The morning light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows and lay in long, warm rectangles across the kitchen floor. Lily was humming to herself as she drew, Gerald the elephant tucked under one arm. James Calloway stood in his enormous, beautiful, empty penthouse and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like the word empty no longer fully applied. On the floor, Lily held up her drawing. She had drawn 3 stick figures. One tall, one medium, one small. They were standing on a road. There was a sun in the corner, with lines shooting out from it in every direction. There were flowers that looked like colorful explosions. "There," she said, with satisfaction. "Now there's people." James took the drawing. He held it in both hands. He looked at those 3 stick figures on the road, tall, medium, small, and he felt something move through him that he didn't have a name for yet. Something that started in the chest and moved outward and made the edges of his vision feel slightly warm. "Thank you," he said. His voice was slightly rough. Lily looked up at him. "You can put it next to the sad one," she said helpfully. "So the sad one knows it's not alone anymore." 3 weeks passed. They were not dramatic weeks. Nothing exploded. Nothing was announced. Life continued in its ordinary way. Maya went to work. Lily went to daycare. The city outside the windows of the building moved through its indifferent rhythms. But something had changed. Something quiet and tectonic, the kind of change that doesn't make any noise but rearranges everything underneath. It started with small things. James had hung Lily's drawing next to the black and white photograph. His housekeeper, Maya, had noticed it on her next shift and said nothing, but he had watched her notice it, watched the way her eyes went to it, and stayed for a moment before she looked away. He had started leaving things in the apartment for when they visited. Not intentionally, he told himself. Not as a statement. He had simply noticed that his pantry lacked orange juice and had bought some. He had noticed that the kitchen floor was hard and cold and had bought a small soft rug. He had found, at the back of a drugstore he had no memory of entering, a box of crayons with 64 colors, the big box, the one every child has dreamed of, and he had put it in the drawer where the old broken crayons had been. He told himself these were coincidences. Maya knocked on his door on a Saturday. She had Lily on her hip. Her baby was tired. He could see that, her head drooping against her mother's shoulder, and Maya had a look on her face that he had come to recognize as her preparing to say something difficult. "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to be honest with me." "All right," he said. She adjusted Lily on her hip. Lily stirred slightly, opened one eye, saw James, and said, "Hi," in a sleepy voice before closing it again. Something in his chest moved. "Are you letting us come up here because you feel sorry for us?" Maya asked. "Because Lily has latched onto you, and you're too kind to. I mean, I need to know if this is." She stopped. "Tried again. I need to know if you actually want us here, or if you're just too polite to say stop." He looked at her for a long moment. "Come inside," he said. She came inside. She settled Lily on the couch with a duck blanket. He had quietly obtained a small throw blanket at some point, he couldn't quite remember when, and when Lily was curled up and breathing the slow breath of sleep, Maya came back to the kitchen, and they sat on opposite sides of the counter, and he made tea, because it was that kind of conversation. "I'm not letting you come up here out of pity," he said. He kept his voice even, direct. "I am not a particularly pitying person. I'm also not especially polite." The corner of Maya's mouth twitched. "Then why?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. He owed her honesty. "Because for the last 3 weeks I have gotten up in the morning and felt like there was a reason to," he said. "And I hadn't felt that in a while." The kitchen was very quiet. "That's a lot of weight to put on a 3-year-old, Maya said carefully. "I know," he said. "It's not just her." He hadn't meant to say that. The words were out before he could stop them, and he watched them land and watched something happen in Maya's face, a careful stillness, a held breath. He looked at his tea. "I should tell you something," he said, "because you deserve to understand who Lily is spending time with." He had never told anyone this story. Not really. Not all of it. But he told her. He told her about the baby. His and Claire's. A pregnancy that had come 3 years into their marriage, unexpected and terrifying, and then, slowly, wonderful. He had let himself want it. He had let himself want it completely. The crib he had researched for 6 hours, the books he had read, the specific careful hope that had grown in him like something green and fragile. They had lost the baby at 22 weeks. A daughter. They had not been prepared for how catastrophic it would be. How it would move through their marriage like a fault line, splitting things apart in ways they hadn't known were possible. Claire had needed to grieve out loud, loudly, openly, with other people, with therapy, with grief groups, with the particular survival strategy of someone who processes pain by letting it out. He had done the opposite. He had sealed everything up. He had gone back to work in 2 weeks. He had nodded at the right times and said the right things, and then quietly, carefully, dismantled every soft part of himself and put it somewhere no one could reach. Claire had begged him to grieve with her. He hadn't been able to. When she left, she had told him that the hardest part was watching him disappear. "You were already gone," she had said. "I was just making it official." He had never told anyone why he flinched, very slightly, every time he heard a child laugh. He had never told anyone why he had sold the apartment they had lived in and moved here, to this enormous glass and steel space that was designed to feel like power rather than like a home. He had never told anyone that sometimes, late at night, he still thought about her, the daughter he had never met, and wondered who she would have been. He told Maya all of it. His voice didn't break. He had trained it too well for that. But by the end of it, his hands were flat on the counter and very still, the way hands get when you're holding something in. Maya had not moved throughout. She had listened the way very few people listen, with her whole self, not waiting for her turn to speak, not formulating responses, just receiving it. When he finished, she didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say "I had no idea" or "that must have been so hard," or any of the careful phrases people offer like bandages over something that doesn't need bandaging. She said quietly, "Her name would have been Lily." He looked up. "What?" She held his gaze. "I named my daughter Lily because it was the name I had always thought was beautiful," she said. "Because when I was alone and pregnant and terrified and I needed something to hold on to, I thought, if she is fierce and bright and completely herself, I want her to have a name that sounds like that."
She paused.
"But you said her name would have been Lily." His voice very quietly. "Yes." The words sat between them like something sacred. "I'm not saying that means something," Maya said carefully. "I'm not the kind of person who says things like the universe sent her to you. I don't know if that's true. But I think," she stopped, "I think sometimes the things we lose leave a space behind. And I think sometimes, if you're very lucky, something finds its way into that space. Not to replace it, just to remind you that warm things exist," he said softly. She nodded. They sat in the quiet kitchen. Through the doorway, they could see Lily sleeping on the couch, her chest rising and falling, one hand curled near her face. "She looks like you," James said. "Everyone says that." A ghost of a smile. "It's a compliment," he said. Maya looked at him. This time she didn't look away. Maya had been 10 years old when she had learned that love was conditional. Her father had taught her that lesson, without meaning to. He was not a cruel man. She wanted to be fair to him, even now. He was simply absent in the way some fathers are absent, physically present but emotionally elsewhere, watching life from behind glass. He had a specific dream for Maya, something practical, something steady, a life that looked like safety from the outside, and when Maya had shown signs of not fitting that dream, he had done what people do when they don't know how to love something that doesn't look the way they expected. He had turned away. She had worked her whole life to not need anyone the way she had needed him. She had been 16 when her mother got sick, 19 when her mother died, 21 when she'd made a series of choices in quick succession that she had never fully let herself examine, a relationship that felt like steadiness and turned out to be control, a city she had moved to, a life she had built on ground that wasn't solid. She had been 22 when she'd had Lily. Alone. The man who would have been Lily's father had left 8 weeks into the pregnancy, and Maya had stood in the bathroom of a one-bedroom apartment in Chicago with a test in her hand and made a choice that she had not regretted for one single day. "I will be enough for this child." That had been the promise. "I will be so enough that she never feels what I felt. She will never look for love and find an empty room." She had kept that promise. She knew she had kept it because Lily moved through the world the way people move when they have been fundamentally, unconditionally loved, unafraid, open, certain in some deep way that she was worth showing up for. But keeping that promise had cost Maya something. She had gotten so good at being enough that she had stopped believing she needed anyone herself. She had built her life like a fortress, small and tight and self-sufficient. She had Lily. She had work. She had the 23 steps from her apartment to the elevator and the particular silence of her mornings before Lily woke up, which was the only silence she allowed herself to actually feel. She had not let herself want anything larger than what she had. She was sitting on a bench in Central Park watching Lily chase pigeons when she allowed herself, for the first time, to think about James Calloway without immediately shutting the thought down. She thought about the way he had sat on his kitchen floor and talked to a stuffed elephant as if it were a valid conversational partner, because Lily had instructed him to. She thought about the way he had looked at Lily's drawing, those 3 stick figures on the road, like it was something in a museum. She thought about what he had told her.
About the baby.
About Claire. About the years of sealing himself up so nothing could reach him. She recognized it. That was the terrifying part. She recognized exactly what he had done because she had done a version of it herself. 2 people who had learned to need nothing, living in the same building, being slowly, relentlessly undone by a 3-year-old with a pink backpack. Lily abandoned the pigeons and ran back to the bench and climbed up next to Maya and pressed her whole warm, small body against her mother's side, the way she did when she needed closeness without being able to articulate why. "Mama," Lily said. "Yeah, baby. Is Mr. Calloway coming to the park?" Maya had not mentioned James today. She had not suggested the park in any way that involved James. "No, sweetie." "Why?" Lily thought about it. "He should come to the park," she said. "Parks make people happy." "Do they?"
"Yes."
"Because of the trees and the dogs and the sky." She said this with complete authority. When people are sad, they should look at more sky. Maya looked at the sky. It was a pale February blue, clear and high and endless. "You're probably right," she said. Lily was quiet for a moment. "Mama," she said, "do you like Mr. Calloway?" Maya felt every single muscle in her body tense simultaneously. "Of course I like him," she said carefully. "He's very kind to us." "No," Lily said, with the forensic precision of a small child cutting through adult evasion. "Do you like him?" Maya looked at her daughter. Her daughter looked back at her. 3 years old, and already able to see things Maya was working very hard not to look at. "That's complicated, baby," Maya said. "Why?" "Because grown-up feelings are complicated." Lily considered this with her head tilted. "Gerald likes Mr. Calloway," she announced. "I asked him." "You consulted the elephant?" "Yes." "Very seriously. Gerald is smart." Maya laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of her, the kind that starts from the middle of you and can't be planned. Lily looked pleased with herself. "Mama," she said, "can I tell you something?" "Always." Lily put her small hand on Maya's hand. Both hands, actually. She covered Maya's hand with both of her small soft ones and looked up with those enormous serious eyes. "It's okay to let someone take care of you," she said. The words were so simple, so direct, so completely, accidentally surgical. Maya's throat tightened. "Where did you hear that?" she whispered. Lily shrugged. "I just know it," she said. Maya looked at her daughter's hands covering hers. Those chubby fingers with their little knuckle rolls. This tiny, fierce person she had made out of nothing but love and desperation and the sheer refusal to let life be smaller than it could be. She had given Lily so much. She had not realized that Lily had been giving it back. She had not realized that this child, this accidental, perfect, world-changing child, had been quietly, patiently, stubbornly teaching her the very thing Maya had tried to teach her, that you are worth showing up for. That love is not something you earn. That warmth is not something you have to protect yourself from. She wrapped her arms around Lily and held her in the winter park under the pale blue sky, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself feel the full weight of what it meant to be held back. James had never given anyone a key to the penthouse before. He had thought about it for 2 days before he did it. He had argued with himself the way he argued with business propositions, laying out the risks, assessing the downside, looking for the rational objection that would make the decision easy. He didn't find one. So on a Thursday morning, he had gone to the building manager and had a key made and had ridden the elevator down to the 4th floor and knocked on the door. Maya had answered in her work clothes, Lily on her hip eating a piece of toast, both of them looking at him with twin expressions of surprise. He had held out the key. Maya had not taken it immediately. She had looked at it and looked at him and looked at it again. "This isn't," she started. "It's not what you're afraid it is," he said quietly. "It's just a key. It means that if Lily ever wants to come upstairs and I'm not answering the door because I'm on a call or I have headphones in, she can. That's all. He paused. You don't have to use it for anything else. I just want her to know she doesn't have to knock. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she took the key.
Lily, she said.
What do you say? Lily looked at the key. She looked at James. She reached out with her small hand and touched it carefully, like it was something magical.
Thank you, she said.
Now I can always find you. He rode the elevator back up alone. Now I can always find you. He sat with those words for a long time.
The key changed something.
It changed it the way small things change large things, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the particular way of a door that has been opened and can't quite be closed again. Lily started coming up in the mornings before her daycare program, sometimes with Maya and sometimes towed behind Daniela from the front desk, who thought the whole situation was the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. She would come in and look around with those assessing eyes and usually announce one thing that needed to change. The sad picture should be moved. The chair by the window should face the park. The kitchen needed a fruit bowl. He made every change, she suggested.
He did not examine why.
The fruit bowl was Lily's favorite. He filled it every week. Apples, oranges, grapes, the occasional banana. Lily would arrive and immediately check the fruit bowl like a tiny inspector, and if it was adequately stocked, she would nod with satisfaction, and if it was low, she would say, "You need more fruit," with a concerned look that implied she feared for his health. Maya started staying longer. It happened gradually, the way real things happen. She would sit at the counter while Lily played and James worked, and something would catch their eye, something on the news, something outside the window, and they would talk. Really talk. Not the careful surface talk of employer and employee, not the polite navigation of two people figuring out what they were to each other, but something more direct and honest than that. She was funny, he discovered. Quietly, unexpectedly funny. She had a way of saying things that seemed ordinary until you caught the angle on them, and then they were suddenly sharp and precise, and you laughed before you could stop yourself. She was also afraid of many of the same things he was afraid of, he realized. She just hid it differently. Where he hid behind walls, she hid behind capability, being so competent and self-sufficient and fine that no one would think to ask if she actually was.
She was not always fine.
He was starting to be able to tell. One evening she came upstairs and she looked like someone who had been holding something together all day and was barely managing. She sat at the counter, and James put tea in front of her without asking, and they sat in silence for a while, Lily asleep on the couch, the city glittering below. Bad day, she said finally.
Yeah. She told him about it.
It was not a dramatic story, just the accumulation of a life that was too much for one person, a babysitter crisis, a billing error that had taken 2 hours to fix, unkindness from someone at work that she was too tired to decide whether to care about. He listened. He did not try to fix it. He had learned that was what she needed, not solutions, just someone to put things in front of. When she finished, she looked at her tea and said, "I don't usually do this." "Do what?" "Talk about it." "I know," he said. "Neither do I." She looked up. "We're a lot alike," she said. "In the bad ways. And maybe some of the good ones," he said. She held his gaze. He had been thinking about something for weeks. He had been avoiding it the way you avoid looking directly at something bright, moving around it, approaching from angles, never head-on. "Maya," he said. She heard something in his voice, and went very still. "I am not good at this," he said. "I want to be honest with you about that. I have spent a long time making sure I didn't need anything. He stopped. Started again. "I don't know how to do this. Whatever this is. I might be bad at it for a while." She was quiet. "I might be too," she said. "I know."
He paused.
"I think we might be bad at it together." "If that's," he stopped. He was not a man who left sentences unfinished. He finished things. He was forcing himself to leave this one unfinished because the ending was her choice. She picked up her tea. She looked at the fruit bowl. She looked at Lily on the couch. She looked at him. You bought strawberries, she said softly. Last week. Lily mentioned once that she loves strawberries, and 2 days later there were strawberries in the fruit bowl. He said nothing. You think I didn't notice everything, she said. The rug. The crayons.
The juice.
The blanket. Her voice was very quiet. You have been taking care of us. Very quietly, very carefully, in all the ways that you could, without ever making it feel like something we owed you. He kept his eyes on his mug.
James, she said.
He looked up. Her eyes were full. I notice everything, she said. I always have. The city hummed quietly below. Lily breathed on the couch. The fruit bowl sat full and bright on the counter. He reached across the counter and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held on. The drawing stayed on the wall for the rest of the winter. Then spring came, and the drawing was moved carefully in its frame, because James had framed it with an actual frame, to the hallway. Because the hallway was where you saw it first, where anyone coming in would see it. 3 stick figures on a road, a crayon sun with lines shooting out in every direction, flowers that looked like colorful explosions. A road with people in it. Lily was 4 now. She had celebrated her birthday in the penthouse, which had been her single, unwavering request. Not a party place, not a restaurant, the penthouse, because that's our place, she had said, with the authority of someone establishing historical fact. James had spent 3 days preparing for that party. He had never in his life spent 3 days preparing for anything that wasn't worth billions of dollars. He had read 4 articles about 4-year-old birthday parties. He had purchased approximately 700% more balloons than were necessary. He had made a list and then a second list and then called David, his assistant, who had said, "Sir, are you excited?" in a tone of such genuine amazement that James had told him to clear his afternoon. The party had been extraordinary. Not because of the balloons or the cake James had ordered from the best bakery in the city or the very small and very carefully curated guest list of Lily's daycare friends. It was extraordinary because of the moment when Lily had stood in the middle of the room with frosting on her nose and looked around at everyone there, her mama and Gerald the elephant, and James and his party hat that Lily had placed on his head with tremendous seriousness, and said, in a voice full of satisfaction, "This is my family." Nobody corrected her. It was 6 months after that, on a Sunday, when James sat down with Maya at the kitchen counter. Their kitchen counter, it felt like that now, the way shared spaces start to feel owned by everyone who loves them, and put something down in front of her.
She looked at it.
A small velvet box. Navy blue. She looked at him. "I am going to say something first," he said. "And then you can open it if you want to." She nodded. He had written what he wanted to say down and then thrown it away because writing it made it feel like a transaction, and this was not a transaction. So he was going from memory, from the heart, which terrified him, which he was doing anyway. 2 years ago, he said, I was a person who had decided that emptiness was the same as safety. I had taken every soft thing in myself and put it somewhere unreachable. I thought I was protecting myself. He looked at his hands. I was just disappearing. Maya was very still. A 3-year-old girl came up to my apartment with a pink backpack and a stuffed elephant, and she sat on my floor, and she looked at me like I was a person worth looking at.
His voice was steady.
He was proud of that. And every day since then I have been becoming something again, someone again. He looked at Maya. You are the reason I'm not afraid anymore, he said quietly. Not because you fixed me. You didn't fix me. I did that, slowly, with your company and your honesty and your patience and your complete refusal to let me disappear again once you'd found me.
He paused.
You and your daughter walked into my empty life, and you filled it so completely that I genuinely cannot now imagine what it looked like before. Maya's eyes were very bright. This isn't about money, he said. I need you to know that. I know what our situation looks like from the outside. I know what people will say, and I know what assumptions will be made, and I want you to know that I am aware of all of that and I don't care, but more importantly, it doesn't apply. What I am asking you has nothing to do with what I have and everything to do with who I am and who you are and who that extraordinary child is." He stopped. "Who she is to me." He opened the box. It was a ring. Not an enormous ring, not a statement ring. It was simple and beautiful, and it had a small lily engraved on the inside of the band, tiny and precise, barely visible, like a secret. "Lily helped me pick it," he said. "She came to the jeweler with me. She eliminated 47 rings before she approved this one. She said it was the right amount of pretty." Maya laughed. It was a wet laugh, the kind that happens when you're crying, and something is also genuinely funny. "She's already bossy," Maya managed. "She gets it from you. She gets it from herself." "Yes," he said. "She does." Maya looked at the ring. She looked at him. "I'm not easy," she said. "I know. I'm going to need you to be patient when I pull away. I know that too. And you have to be honest with me. Always. Even when it's hard. Especially then. I promise." She was quiet for a moment. "James," she said. "Yeah." She was right, you know. Lily. When she came up here with her backpack. Maya's voice was soft. "She saw what needed to happen before either of us did." "She usually does," he said. "She's 4. She's extraordinary." Maya reached out and picked up the ring. She held it for a moment. This small, simple, lily-inscribed ring that a 3-year-old had helped choose and a lonely man had carried in his pocket for 2 weeks before finding the courage. She put it on. She looked at it on her hand. Then she got up off the stool and walked around the counter, and he stood up and she put her arms around him, and they stood in the kitchen, their kitchen with the city below and the drawing in the hallway and the fruit bowl on the counter, and she pressed her face against his shoulder and held on. "Mama." "James." Lily's voice from the hallway. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, hair everywhere, Gerald dangling from one hand, eyes moving between them with an expression of intense evaluation. "Did you ask her?" she demanded, looking at James. "Yes," he said. "Did she say yes?" "She did." Lily looked at Maya. "Mama," she said very seriously, "are you happy?" Maya laughed again, that full, real laugh that came from somewhere deep. "Yes, baby," she said. "I'm happy." Lily nodded with tremendous satisfaction. "Good," she said. "I'm hungry. Can we have pancakes?" James was already reaching for the cabinet. "Triangles?" he asked. "Triangles," Lily confirmed. "And Gerald wants circles." "Gerald can have circles." Lily climbed up onto her stool. She put Gerald on the counter. She watched James get out the pan and the batter with the attentive eyes of a child who has, by sheer force of love and stubbornness and a pink backpack packed on a Tuesday morning, rearranged an entire world. Outside the windows, New York was waking up into a bright spring morning. The light came in long and gold across the kitchen floor, across the fruit bowl, across the crayon drawing in its frame in the hallway, 3 figures on a road, a sun with lines shooting in every direction, flowers like explosions. A road with people in it. Lily started humming her 4-word, 37-verse song. Maya leaned her head on James's shoulder as he stirred the batter. Gerald the elephant observed all of this from the counter with his small glass eyes, which had always looked knowing, right from the very beginning. Some people enter your life, like weather, dramatic and loud. Others arrive quietly, with a pink backpack and a stolen granola bar and a stuffed elephant, and they simply refuse to let you be alone anymore. Those are the ones who change everything.